We're not talking about simple generational gripes here. This isn't about avocado toast or screen time. You know that feeling that the ground has shifted beneath our kids' feet. Let's look at something called Stage 5. It's a quiet but devastating collapse of a fundamental life script. Honestly, can you even describe the path to a stable adult life anymore? That old map is completely gone. The rules your parents followed simply don't apply. Think about the basic promise of work hard and get ahead. That equation is now fundamentally broken. What if the ladder itself has been pulled up? We need to talk about the first pillar that's fallen. Secure, lifelong careers are now a relic. A single company pension is almost a fairy tale. Gig work and constant reskilling are the new normal. But that's just the surface of the problem. The financial anchor of adulthood has been cut. Can you imagine buying a home on a single average salary? For millions of young people, that's an impossible fantasy. Home ownership rates for the young have absolutely plummeted. They're not just delaying buying a house. Many are giving up entirely. And renting is no safe harbor either. So where does that leave a person trying to build a foundation? Look at the second pillar crumbling right now. The cost of simply existing has skyrocketed. Education isn't a ticket up. It's a ball and chain of debt. Have you seen the numbers on student loan balances? That debt doesn't just affect their bank accounts. It delays every major life decision for a decade or more. Starting a family feels like a luxury they can't afford. The math of raising a child is now terrifying. So they wait, and that waiting has profound consequences. The traditional sequence of life stages is in total disarray. Now let's get to the real heart of Stage 5. It's not about any one of these issues in isolation. It's about their catastrophic convergence. All of these shocks are hitting at the exact same time. We're watching a perfect storm reshape an entire generation's destiny. Their economic reality is built on quicksand. The psychological toll of this is immense. You know that constant background hum of anxiety? For them, it's not background noise. It's the main channel. They're navigating a world with no safety nets. Previous generations had communities and institutions to catch them. Those supports have largely eroded. What replaces a town, a union, or a stable local economy? Often, it's just a smartphone screen. Connection is digital, but support is fleeting. And this leads us to a profound curiosity hook. What happens to a society when its young people can't see a future? We're about to find out. The answer isn't just about economics. It's written in the data on despair. Look at the statistics on loneliness and mental health. They tell a story of a generation isolated in plain sight. Honestly, have you ever felt truly secure without a stable place to live? That foundational insecurity colors every single choice. Delayed independence isn't a choice. It's a financial mandate. More young adults are living with parents well into their 30s. But this isn't about laziness or failure to launch. It's a rational response to a housing market that's priced them out. Can you build a life when your basic shelter is perpetually uncertain? This constant instability prevents the building of capital, both financial and social. Now, let's talk about the third collapsed pillar, predictable progress. Your career likely had a clear upward trajectory early on. Today, entry-level jobs demand years of experience for stagnant pay. Promotions and raises are no longer tied to time or loyalty. The corporate ladder has been replaced with a slippery pyramid, and at the bottom, there's a crowd all fighting for the same few spots. What does that do to your ambition over time? It quietly erodes it. You start to question the point of the relentless hustle. The reward for burning out is often just the chance to burn out again. So why would anyone commit to a path that offers diminishing returns? They're not opting out. They're being logically pushed out. The social contract that traded effort for stability has been shredded. Let's consider an often overlooked consequence of this. When you can't plant roots, you can't build community. Geographic mobility for work fragments, social networks. Your childhood friends are scattered across the country chasing jobs. Your support system is a group chat, not a physical neighborhood. How do you raise children without a village around you? You do it exhausted, alone, and at tremendous personal cost. This isolation isn't a personal failing, it's a structural one, built into this new stage of collapse. And it feeds directly into the crisis of meaning. If the old milestones are unattainable, what are you working toward? The goalposts haven't just moved, they've vanished. We're witnessing a generation crafting entirely new definitions of success. But that innovation is born from necessity, not pure choice. It's a survival adaptation. Now, here's a powerful curiosity hook. What if the most damaging loss isn't financial at all? What if it's the loss of a predictable narrative for your own life? That script gave people a sense of control and purpose. Without it, the future feels like a series of unpredictable threats. This anxiety becomes a constant background operating system. It affects everything from health to relationships to political views. And that brings us to the next unsettling pillar. Let's talk about the fourth pillar, which is the collapse of institutional trust. Your generation might have trusted that institutions would generally work. For your kids, that faith has been systematically broken. Look at the news cycle they grew up with. Financial crises, political gridlock, climate inaction. Why would they believe in a system that seems to consistently fail them? They see a government debating issues while their futures are negotiated away. They see corporations posting record profits while wages stay flat. Honestly, can you blame them for feeling cynical? This isn't apathy, it's a rational assessment of the evidence. They are the first generation to have less in real terms than their parents. That's not an opinion, it's a brutal economic fact. So, what replaces the guidance that churches, unions, and local governments once provided? Often, it's a curated online persona or an influencer's advice, but that's a fragile substitute for real communal support. Now, consider the sheer weight of the information environment they navigate. They are bombarded with global crises from the moment they learn to scroll. How do you plan a life when the news screams about existential threats daily? This crisis fatigue is a new form of psychological load. It makes long-term planning feel not just hard, but naive. You start to live in a series of short-term sprints because the long track is obscured. And this affects their most personal choices, like having children. For many, choosing not to have kids is a profound act of responsibility. It's a response to economic pressure, yes, but also to climate anxiety. Bringing a life into a world you perceive as unstable can feel unethical. Can you understand that heartbreaking calculation? It's a sacrifice of a fundamental human experience for a future they can't control. This isn't a small shift. It's a demographic earthquake. Let's pivot to another tangible consequence, the erosion of leisure. Free time is not truly free when you're always on call for a gig or a side hustle. The boundary between work and life has been completely erased. Your vacation was likely a true disconnect from the office. For them, the phone is the office, and it's always in their pocket. True rest becomes a guilty luxury, not a replenishing necessity. Burnout isn't an event, it's the baseline. So, where does joy or simple contentment come from in this setup? It's often commodified into a subscription service or a fleeting digital hit. That's a poor replacement for the deep satisfaction of building something lasting. And this brings us to a critical and often invisible loss. What's been stolen is the ability to take a risk. When you have no financial cushion, one wrong move can be catastrophic. Starting a business, changing careers, or even moving cities becomes a high-stakes gamble. Security is the prerequisite for bravery, and they have little of either. Their world is designed to minimize risk, which also minimizes opportunity. They are navigating a tightrope without a net, and everyone is watching them wobble. Now, here's the unsettling part we often miss. The stage 5 collapse isn't happening to them in a passive way. They are the first generation to be fully conscious of the collapse as it happens. They have the data, the comparisons, and the global perspective in real time. They can see exactly what they've lost, and that knowledge itself is a burden. That burden has a name. It's called anticipatory grief for a future that may never arrive. They are mourning life milestones they suspect they'll never reach. And that grief is often misinterpreted as laziness or entitlement. Look at the way they're forced to approach time itself. For you, time could be invested in a career that would pay off decades later. For them, time is a currency that must be spent immediately on survival. Long-term investment feels like a gamble with terrible odds. So, what strategy makes sense in a short-term world? You optimize for the next month, not the next decade. This creates a cycle that's incredibly hard to break. Honestly, have you ever felt stuck in a present that won't let you build a future? That's their daily reality. Now, let's examine the fifth and perhaps most subtle pillar, vanished pathways. There used to be more than one acknowledged route to a good life. You could join a skilled trade, work a union job, or climb a corporate ladder. Each path had its own map and its own milestones. Today, those maps are faded and the signposts are gone. Every path seems to funnel toward the same digital winner-take-all competition. Why are there so few clear, dignified alternatives now? The middle has fallen out, leaving a chasm between low-wage work and elite success. This isn't just an economic shift. It's a narrowing of the human imagination. What do you want to be? The answers are now fraught with financial panic. Passion is a luxury they're told to monetize or abandon. So, they choose majors and jobs based on debt repayment schedules, not dreams. Can a society thrive when its young people are forced to be so ruthlessly pragmatic? We're about to find out the long-term cost of that bargain. This pressure cooker environment is reshaping their relationships too. Dating is analyzed through a lens of financial viability and shared debt burdens. How much student loan debt do you have is a legitimate first date question. Partnership becomes a financial merger for survival as much as a romantic union. That's a lot of weight to put on something as fragile as love. It makes starting a family feel less like a joy and more like a complex financial audit. And what about the parents watching all this happen? You feel a helplessness that's profoundly new. You can't offer the same advice that worked for you because the world is different. Your well-intentioned pull yourself up by your bootstraps line rings hollow. There are no bootstraps when you can't afford the boots. This creates a quiet rift of misunderstanding, even in loving families. They see your success as luck or timing. You see their struggle as a lack of grit. But here's the crucial curiosity hook. What if this isn't just their problem to solve? What if stage 5 collapse is actually a failure of our collective imagination? We keep trying to fix the old map, but the territory itself has changed. The solutions of the past cannot address the collapse of the present. And that realization leads us to the final, most important question of all. That question is simple. What comes after the collapse? This isn't about returning to a past that's gone for good. It's about asking what new structures can possibly be built on this unstable ground. Look at the ways they're already adapting out of pure necessity. They're prioritizing flexibility over loyalty and experiences over assets. But let's be clear, this isn't a stylish choice, it's a survival tactic. When you can't own property, you curate a lifestyle. When you can't have job security, you build a personal brand. These are ingenious but exhausting forms of compensation. Honestly, can you sustain a lifetime in permanent adaptation mode? The human spirit is resilient, but it also needs periods of rest and stability. We're seeing the cracks in that resilience already. The rates of anxiety and depression aren't just statistics, they're symptoms. They're the body and mind reacting to a chronically insecure environment. So where does hope find a foothold here? It often looks like a retreat into smaller, more controllable worlds, tight-knit online communities, hyperlocal mutual aid, and digital niches. These are new forms of tribe, built for a fragmented age. But can these digital villages ever provide the same tangible safety net? That's still an open and critical experiment. Now, consider the political and social implications of this generational experience. A generation that feels the system is rigged will not engage with it in traditional ways. They might not vote, or they might demand its radical transformation. You can see this polarization as a direct product of collapsed faith. Why play by rules you believe are designed for you to lose? This isn't a phase, it's a fundamental recalibration of citizenship, and it will define the coming decades of public life. What about their attitude toward older generations? There's a palpable and often unspoken sense of betrayal. They inherited problems they didn't create and bills they didn't authorize. The climate, the debt, the inflated housing markets. It's a handed-down crisis. Can you understand the source of that resentment? It's not personal, it's systemic. Yet, within that, there's also a fierce and pragmatic realism. They are the ultimate pragmatists, because they have to be. They question everything, from career paths to marriage to retirement. Nothing is taken for granted, because nothing has been granted to them. This constant questioning is exhausting, but it's also their superpower. They are not blindly following a broken script. They are, by force, writing a new one in real time. That's an incredible burden, but it's also a seed of profound change. The old promise was about climbing a ladder someone else built. The new emerging reality is about learning to build your own shelter entirely. It's harder, scarier, and has no guarantee of success, but it might be the only way forward. And this leads us to the final, unavoidable curiosity hook. If this is the new normal, what does success even mean for your children? The answer won't be found in any old economics textbook. It will be written in the choices they make every single day. Those choices are already pointing toward a radically different definition of a life well lived. Success might mean mental peace over a corner office. It might mean time freedom over a high salary. It could be measured in community ties rather than property lines. Look at the quiet rise of concepts like soft life or quiet quitting. These aren't laziness, they're boundary setting for personal preservation. They are logical withdrawals from a grind that offers no lasting reward. Honestly, is that a surrender, or is it a smarter way to live? The answer depends entirely on which generation you ask. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Is any of this reversible? Some economic trends might be slowed, but the psychological shift is permanent. They have seen behind the curtain, and they can't unsee it. The faith in a linear, predictable progression is gone for good. So the real task isn't to restore a lost world. It's to create new anchors in a world of constant flux. What could those anchors possibly be? Perhaps it's portable skills, not company loyalty. Maybe it's a strong, geographically dispersed network, not a hometown. It could be a mindset that finds stability within itself, not from external institutions. That's an incredibly tall order for any person. Can we, as a society, make that path any easier? We could start by honestly validating their experience, not dismissing it. We could stop offering solutions from a playbook that no longer exists. Instead, we could listen to the solutions they are already piecing together. This isn't about handing them a new map. It's about supporting them as they survey this strange new land. The final pillar to discuss isn't collapsing, it's being born. It's the pillar of redefined resilience. Their resilience isn't about stoically enduring decades at one job. It's about agility, constant learning, and emotional fortitude in the face of chaos. That's a different kind of strength forged in a different kind of fire. It might just be the exact strength needed for the century ahead. So where does this leave us and them? It leaves us at a crossroads between nostalgia and a difficult, clear-eyed hope. Their path will be less linear, less secure, and less defined by traditional trophies, but it could also be more intentional, more communal in new ways, and more adaptable. The story of Stage 5 collapse isn't a tragedy with a fixed ending. It's an unsettling, ongoing transition that we are all a part of. Your kids aren't worse off in every conceivable way. They are navigating a more complex and unforgiving landscape with a different set of tools. The ultimate question isn't whether they'll be okay by our old standards. It's whether we can understand, and perhaps even learn from, the new world they are building. Because that world, for better or worse, will eventually be the only one there is.